What's going on? My name is Bo. Thank you guys for coming to the channel. I'm going to be posting a lot of T1N videos on here, repairs, maintenance, camper van conversion stuff. I picked up a lot in my last like 5 or 6 months of owning one, and I'd really like to share it with you guys because there was a lot of stuff that I couldn't figure out on my own, and I had to outsource and all that. So I'd really like to share what information I have. But today, what we're talking about is first off, why a T1N Sprinter, why you would get one, and some things to look for when you are getting one. So basically, a kind of gist of how I came to the conclusion of getting a T1N is about 5 or 6 months ago. Myself and my fiance were looking at renting an RV. We have 3 dogs, 3 huskies, so we like to take vacations, but we thought it'd be awesome if we could take a vacation and also bring our dogs. So when looking to rent an RV, we came to find out that they actually rent for quite a bit, and it's quite a popular thing these days to rent directly to people, rent your RV or rent your van. So when we saw that, we figured, hey, this might be a good investment for us if we, picked up an RV or a camper van and used it when we wanted to use it and rented it out when we didn't, and kind of supplement the cost of it. So we looked at a couple of RVs, but the problem with RVs is there's a couple of things you want to take into consideration. One, they're huge, so you need a place to put them. Here, there's a limit on length and height to park them on the street. We only have 2 parking spots, so that didn't really work. And then also, when you're traveling around, there's a lot of restrictions on recreational vehicles as to where you can park them, what you can do with them, and stuff like that, depending on where you're at. Another thing was I'm comfortable driving larger vehicles. My fiance really hasn't ever driven larger vehicles, so she wouldn't have been really able to drive the RV. So that taken into consideration, one of the first reasons you would get a Sprinter, and if you fall in this category, is you can actually go a lot more places and do a lot more with them. For instance, you can park a Sprinter on the side of the road and stay in there for the night. And as with an RV, you might have issues depending on where you're at. They're more fuel efficient. They're easier to drive, and they last longer. And again, going back, there's just a lot of restrictions RVs have that you don't have as a camper van owner. So that was definitely a large incentive for us to get one. And then also it fits in our parking space. So that's a large reason we opted for a camper van. Now, going into specifically a T1N Sprinter is, first off, our budget was, we wanted to spend about $10,000 on a van and about $5,000 on the renovations and the camper build. And I know this is really ambitious for a budget, but it's kind of just what we had at the time. And, when looking at vans around $10,000, if you get something like an older Chevy van, camper van or something like that, anything with over 100,000 miles on it, you're kind of asking for problems. That's a lot of miles on like a normal vehicle, and you can run into, engine, transmission issues. Especially with the builds, it's a lot more weight than these vehicles are typically used to carrying. So with that in consideration, we kind of came across the T1N. Now, if you knew anything about the T1N, first thing you should know is that they have, quote unquote, a 1,000,000-mile engine. That's obviously not always the case, but basically it's a very well-known Mercedes diesel engine. And it's not unusual for these to go up 600, 700,000 miles if they're maintained properly and, with proper maintenance, obviously. So knowing that, and that's not abnormal with other diesels as well, they just last longer. We kind of started going into T1N. Another reason is because you have options like the high top and the long wheelbase. And we have the high top long wheelbase, and there's plenty of room in there. We have almost a king size bed, counters. We're putting a bathroom in, so definitely the most room inside, the most options, fuel economy, and they last a long time. So that's why this whole T1N craze has been going on for the last couple of years, even longer, is because if you're going to build your own camper van, this is really the van you want. Very strong engine, very reputable. You can take it across the country. It's not an issue. big inside. And the other reason is because so many of these were used for work vehicles that you can typically find a used one, that a business had for a number of years, and you can buy it. And 5 or 6 years ago, you could get one of these for $5,000 or $6,000. Today, it's not that way. They've grown so much in popularity that you would be lucky to find one if you found one at the price we got it at, which we got ours for $9,000. The reason we got ours for this price is we looked around, we were seeing them for 15,000, 14, 13, all around the 200K mile range. And so we found ours and it was beat up. It was a Sparklets van. It had like a 10-year-old wrap on it, a big dent on the top. The interior was pretty messed up. But the main thing was it had about 200K, which is not bad mileage for these, and it ran really well. And I figured, I can do the handiwork on these. As long as it runs good, the engine and transmission are good, then I can take care of a lot of the little stuff. So that's why we opted for the one we got. And so to reiterate, we were kind of looking for a high top, long wheelbase with about that mileage. And anytime you get one that was owned by a company, as a fleet vehicle, it was maintained well because they have, routine maintenance that has to be done at certain times and repairs. And they really go by the book as far as like the ownership goes. So those are kind of all reasons you would want to get a T1N Sprinter. Now, going into a couple things you want to look for when getting your T1N Sprinter, in my experience so far. So the first thing is there's a thing you will find on the internet called the Black Death. It sounds a lot worse than it is. The first time I heard about it, I thought it was like, oh, you get this and your van's gonna die, like your engine's gonna explode or whatever. That's not necessarily the case. What Black Death is if you take the cover off the top of the engine, the little plastic cover, so you can see the valves and everything. Sometimes there's like a black resin that builds up there. What causes this is the fuel injectors that's spraying out the diesel. They're not spraying out evenly, or they're clogged, and it kind of builds up like this black resin. And if it's left untreated, then it can get inside the engine and cause some major issues. So that's the first thing you want to check for. I actually didn't check for that when I bought it. I checked for it like a couple weeks ago. Thank God there's no Black Death. And again, it's not like a disqualifier. Like if you see a little bit, it's just a little bit, under there, then it can be reversed if you take care of it soon enough by cleaning it and cleaning the injectors and everything. So number one would be the Black Death. That's something you want to keep an eye out for. Number two, and this is something that I definitely had to learn the hard way, was a lot of these, since we were just talking about how they were like company vehicles, a lot of these will have wraps on them. And that's fine, but here's the thing you need to know. If a wrap's left on a car for a long time, like 4+ years, especially these companies use like cheaper quality wraps, and I'm in California, so the wrap was just baking on this van for years, and it was hard to get off. Like when I saw it, I didn't, this is kind of an assumption I made. I messed up. I saw it and I was like, that might be like a couple $100 to pay a wrap company to take off, or, like peel it off or whatever. No, if the wrap is on there for a long time, it's literally like peeling a sticker off something, where you can't just pull it and it comes off. It just comes off in little chunks. And basically what ended up happening was, I wouldn't have really cared, but like I was saying, we wanted to rent it out, so we wanted it to look nice. So the wrap had to come off because it was faded and cracked. And so the only way to really do it when it's to this degree of cooked on there is you get a heat gun and you heat it up, and then you scrape it off with a plastic razor blade. And literally, like, I called wrap companies. A lot of them wouldn't even do it. The ones that would do it wanted like $2,000 to $3,000 to take it off. So I chipped on it myself for like days. I paid guys off Craigslist $20 an hour for like a week to take it off. And ultimately, what it came down to was I ended up spending about $1,500 to have it removed, plus a bunch of my time. And still, after you take the wrap off, a lot of the adhesive stays on the van. So now the wrap's off, but I have all this adhesive I still need to deal with. So definitely that's something to consider when you're getting a Sprinter. If it has one of these wraps on it, um, I wouldn't say don't buy it, but just factor in that amount. You know, if it's an older wrap on there, I think I'm going to have to spend 2 or 3 thousand more dollars to get this off if you want to take the wrap off. The third thing I would recommend checking out and just taking into consideration when buying a Sprinter is, like I was saying, when we bought ours, it needed a lot of interior work. And I kind of downplayed that in my head. I figured, it can't be that bad, but a lot of it really added up. A couple examples are like a lot of these have the broken vents in the front, as you'll see. The reason these are like this is because in order to take them off, if you want to do anything to the dash or under the dash or anywhere around there, um, then you have to use a trim removal tool on the outside of them. And the vents are right next to where you put the trim removal tool. So it just pops them right out and you can't really get them back in. It's a horrible design. But anyway, I had to replace these, and you can't really find used parts that easy for these. So, and they're not in junkyards really. So, I mean, you might get lucky, but these were $350 for us to replace. And that's kind of just the beginning of it. Another problem we had was with like the doors and the locks and the actuators and all that. And there was pretty much something wrong with every one of them. Like some of them were bent, some of them the actuator didn't work. And all this, these little parts, the mechanism and this actuator and that probably added up to about $500 as well. And keep in mind, anything I do is finding the best price and getting the best bargain. So these are, items I could use if I can get them, if not like the cheapest price. There's not really too many good like aftermarket makers of these parts, and there honestly some of them aren't even really that easy to come by. So just take that into consideration. All those little things add up. These aren't like Honda Civics or a very common vehicle where you can go and find a part or go pull one from a junkyard. And that kind of leads me to my next point is number 4 would be these Sprinter vans are a very particular vehicle. What I mean by that is they kind of are in this gray area of, yeah, they're Mercedes, but Dodge makes them and sometimes Freightliner makes them. And because of that, there's actually very few people who want to work on them. They have specialized Sprinter mechanics. But for instance, my fiance's family owns a diesel truck shop, and we would have thought that they would be able to work on them because they're a diesel truck. They're a Mercedes Dodge diesel, and no, they would not work on them. Pretty much anywhere we called around here, unless it's like a common issue, like if it's something that has to do with like the doors or like the AC system or like a common car thing, like as far as like engine and like internals go, a lot of people won't work on them. And we have one Sprinter mechanic by us, and they're really just no good, and they charge a lot of money because they're like specialists on these Sprinters. So not a lot of people want to work on them. And then you have to remember things like, we took to get our alignment done on it, and a lot of places couldn't do it because they're such big, tall vehicles that you kind of need like a specialized truck place to do like an alignment. And what I touched on before was the parts for these are either expensive, they're hard to get, or sometimes I can't even find them. I suspect because these last so long and people are really loving these and enjoying these now, there might be a little bit of like an aftermarket community that comes up, or companies that make these parts. But yeah, a lot of them were really difficult to find, and they're definitely not in junkyards. So you can't really, I don't think there's one in a junkyard within 200 miles of me, and I'm in Southern California. So there's a lot of options, but they're hard to get parts for, and the parts that break on them are the parts that break on all of them. So yeah, it was really difficult. I think maybe once or twice. And I'm a big like cost cutting, secondary market, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist kind of guy. And I was really not able to find almost anything I was looking for parts wise for these. I think maybe one interior part, and that's searching like San Diego, LA, like everywhere around us. So that's just something to take into consideration. My best luck I've had with finding affordable parts for these is eBay. For some reason, eBay is great with parts, electronic parts for cars and whatever. So that's just something to take into consideration. Now, with all that being said, I still think these are a great investment. I think that, if you get one that's in decent condition and you take care of it, you can get a very long life out of it. It took me a couple months to get through all the maintenance and the build and everything, but we took ours up to Big Bear a couple weeks ago and it was absolutely great. We had plenty of room. All the dogs fit in it. It got decent gas mileage. So I think they're a great investment and I definitely think it's worth grabbing one. It looks like they might only go up in price. So